Views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. I'm Jamison Rabbit, and it's just me this week, no co-host, but I brought along a lot of movies for this, the 496th episode of Real Reviews. I have 4 movies to talk about, plus a fun throwback movie and a look ahead at some really exciting movies that are upcoming in the upcoming weeks. So let's go ahead and get started with what we have this week. First, we're going to go to what we have on the marquee, and it's a little tricky because it's on the marquee. It's also a streaming film. It's Five Nights at Freddy's from director Emma Tammi. This is a movie that is based on a successful video game franchise, which takes place in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, a Chuck E. Cheese type place. It's a first-person game where you're trapped inside as the security guard, and you have to keep an eye on surveillance footage to avoid the killer robotic animals. Well, this movie stars Josh Hutcherson as Mike. Mike is a security guard. He's hired for this dilapidated, long-closed pizza place, I guess to keep people out of this place, even though it's been closed for years. He's hired by the owner, Steve, played by Matthew Lillard. Mike is at a tough spot in his life. Having lost his parents, he's tasked with caring for his younger sister, Abby, who is played by Piper Rubio. And he's haunted by some childhood trauma surrounding the disappearance of his brother when they were both kids. And we see him replaying those childhood moments with his brother in his head and in his dreams ad nauseum throughout this movie. They also have an aunt who is constantly trying to take Abby away. She is played by Mary Stuart Masterson. She seems to be a character who, a kind of a cheesy villain who is from a different children's movie to me. She felt really out of place in here, but she's here. Meanwhile, what Mike finds out is at night, these animatronic pizza mascots come to life. You see them right there. Oh man, they come to life. They lumber around the building silently, looking to kill. And there's a reason for all of this. They're not just doing it randomly. A police officer named Vanessa, played by Elizabeth Leilas, who helps Mike learn the truth and helps Mike deal with childhood trauma and has some answers. Unfortunately, the interactions between Mike and Vanessa never really have a ton of spark for them. And it felt like, to me, her character, I have very little connection to these games. My kids played these games when they were little, so I have no connection to the games of the movie, but it seems to me like in the game that she would have been an NPC who shows up to deliver some text-based information needed to play the game, and that's kind of what her character felt like in this movie. She shows up, she gives you some information that you need, and then Mike moves on about his journey. It's a PG-13 horror movie for kids, and what's interesting is, there's these animatronic robots coming along killing people. Of course, because it's PG-13, it's not really gory in any way. There's no blood. It's just kind of these robots moving. So the PG-13 to me reads kids movie. The childhood trauma element of this movie, which is a very heavy dose in this movie, reads adult story. And so that dichotomy kind of led me to be confused onto the tone of this movie for quite a bit of it. And kind of leaves me wondering, like, is this an intro to horror for kids? I know for a specific generation, like my 2 boys' generation, this is a big name franchise, Five Nights at Freddy's, and it means a lot to them. I don't have a lot of connection to it. I would have been very happy to watch these robot animals and robot food items kill people throughout the movie, like really get into it. But we're kind of spinning tires throughout the movie with this childhood trauma bit that our lead just can't seem to escape. The movie looks fine. It's a pretty basic movie. He's running around. These robots are trying to kill him. He's trying to figure out why. He's also trying to deal with the fact that his missing brother, all this stuff. The characters look good. They look like they would out of the video game. They're made by Jim Henson's workshop and operated by his puppeteers. And so that part is great, how they did it and how they make these things move in so many so many different ways is really interesting, and it looks great. And the pizza place looks nostalgic. It looks like a Showbiz or a Chuck E. Cheese or any of these places that people of my generation used to love to go to. But I just couldn't take any more of that mopey Josh Hutcherson PETA. Mopey PETA was just, it got to be a little much for me. I wanted something exciting to happen. What's interesting is this movie made a ton of money. I believe it made $78 million opening weekend. Huge opening weekend, considering that it was a film that came out day and date in theaters and also streaming for free on Peacock, if you have that. And so you'd think that would really hurt the box office, but it didn't, which is really surprising to me. And it really kind of, it makes me wonder if this is going to continue to happen now, if they're going to continue to do these day and dates with these types of movies. We saw this with the Halloween sequels during the pandemic. But I believe the success of this is also going to lead studios to say we need to make more PG-13 horror movies. I don't think we need that. It felt more like a Scooby-Doo flick mixed with a Morrissey album than it did a cool horror movie. I know I'm not the audience, okay? It's also nearly 2 hours long, and I felt that 2-hour runtime. It felt longer than Killers of the Flower Moon to me because I was checking my watch pretty regularly. I saw a movie and I reviewed a movie here on the show maybe 2 years ago, I believe it was, that is a very similar concept to this, only I thought was done more interestingly and definitely more gory. It's called Willy's Wonderland, stars Nicolas Cage as a guy who has to go work as a night janitor in one of these places when the animatronic animals come to kill him, and he has to really fight back, and there's some gory stuff going on, and it's Nick Cage. It's really interesting. And so that's a film I would recommend over Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, I know a lot of people went out and saw this, and it's become a massive hit. For me, though, it was a massive miss, and I end up giving Five Nights at Freddy's 2 out of 5 stars. Could have been a lot better, in my opinion. Moving on to our true streaming spotlights. We have a few of them this week. The first one is a film called R.M.N. R.M.N. This is a Romanian film that came out a little while ago from director Cristian Mungiu. I don't know. Stars Marin Grigor as Matthias. Matthias is a butcher by trade, but his short temper causes him to lose his job that he has in Germany, forcing him to return to his little Transylvanian village in Romania. He's got a lot of entanglements when he comes home. He's got a sick father, Otto, who is suffering from dementia, among other things. He also has a young son, Rudy, who he hasn't seen in quite some time. And Rudy is living with his mother, Anna, played by Macrina Bellandro, who may or may not be Matthias' wife. I couldn't quite make sense of it. And Matthias thinks that she's been coddling young Rudy too much, not giving the tough love that he needs. Meanwhile, Matthias is also trying to chase down his old girlfriend, Shilla, played by Judith Slate. Shilla owns the bakery in town, very successful. And so he's kind of dealing with all this stuff. Rudy, the young boy, in the time that Matthias has been away, has stopped talking after seeing something frightening in the woods around his house. Matthias seems like he's trying to do everything at once with all of these people, and he's trying to deal with his son, and he takes Rudy out hunting, as you see right there in the trailer, to make a man out of him and figure out why he's not talking. And he's also there to fight with both women from his past and struggle with how to deal with his aging, dying father. Also, he doesn't have a job, so Matthias is trying to look for work. And Shilla, of course, offers him a job at her bakery where she is desperate for help. She can't get any of the locals to work there because they have all decided to go take higher paying jobs in Germany and other places. She finally ends up turning and reaching out to the EU, the European Union, for help, and she's brought in 3 workers from Sri Lanka to help her keep the bakery open. But this is the big turning point that stirs up all the locals. We begin to really see the ugly side of this Transylvanian village. Murmurings and grumblings in the church turn to shouts and arguments in the streets as locals reveal their prejudices about these Sri Lankan workers in the bakery. And at first it's a fear or at least it's being said as a fear of them taking over, as the, we use this in quotes, gypsies had. The word gypsies is used as kind of a boogeyman word, not so coded in its meaning of what it is. But then the real reasons for the disdain for these Sri Lankan workers, it starts to get ugly, and it's all justified in the minds of the locals, as many in the village basically rank their racism for various ethnicities within Romania. And it's a classic, we don't mind them if they stay in their country, and people that are racist against other ethnicities in their country take them on as friends because, well, we both hate these people. And so you have people banding together who normally wouldn't like each other because of this disdain. You have Hungarians, you have German-speaking folks, you have Romanians alike, who all kind of get along barely, don't love each other, but they all band together to say, we do not like these Sri Lankans. They're very different from us. And this throws Sheila in a horrible spot because she needs to keep this bakery open. None of these people are willing to step up and take the job that she offers, but they say you cannot hire these people specifically. And this film is a quiet drama for the most part, and it's shot in a decidedly blue tone throughout the majority of the movie, which lends this feeling of coldness and bleakness and isolation to it, which you really felt. You felt those cold Romanian winter days. And the loneliness that Anna, Rudy's mom, feels as she does her best with Rudy, and how she's questioned and vilified by this man who returns home and starts pushing his way around while also openly chasing his ex-girlfriend. And Anna's like, you weren't here to raise this kid, and now you come in and you push me around, tell me what a horrible mother I am. It deals with the dynamics of distrust with the EU and its meddling into local affairs, but it also provides, the EU provides the pay that these same locals receive by working in Germany for higher wages. So these same people that say the EU needs to butt out, stop sending Sri Lankan workers into this town, are also the same people who are happy to collect those EU checks to go work in Germany, being the foreign people in a different country. You see what I'm getting at. And they are exactly what they revile. And this film explodes finally in a long scene in a community meeting in which everything comes out on the table. And it's a single, unmoving shot for several minutes where we just watch the events. It's almost if you watch K-Sun here and you watch our community meetings, the camera's set there and you watch the event. It's kind of what this was. And you watch as everything starts to come out to the surface and prejudices are unveiled. And you watch Sheila and Matthias reacting and kind of lacking reaction sometimes to verbal attacks. And that was, it's the best moment of the movie. And Matthias is far from a sympathetic character, but he's a man who we've seen in film before and maybe in our own lives. A guy who he sees himself as the answer to problems, but is ill-equipped to fix people and those failings, especially with his son and his father. And those failings to fix the problems sink him deeper and deeper into the muck. And I was drawn into this film. I was really drawn into the subdued performances, the politics involved. It might be, the subdued nature of this film, from the majority of it, might be almost too below the surface for some people. But I really dug it. I really enjoyed this film. It's really interesting to see into other cultures. And this Romanian film was incredibly interesting to me. So I ended up giving R.M.N. 4 out of 5 stars. It's one that I highly recommend. Go check it out. It's streaming right now. All right, let's move on to the next big film on the streaming spotlight. We turn to Netflix for the new film called Pain Hustlers from director David Yates. This film stars Emily Blunt and Chris Evans. Look at him. You see him right there. This film comes at a time when we are really looking at how we got into this opioid crisis and are seeing the effects of people like the Sackler family. We've seen documentaries about the Sackler family and how greed, as always, led by loose morals and looser restrictions, led us to Big Pharma being one of the biggest killers in our country. And this film is based on a New York Times investigative article that became a book. Liza Drake, who is Emily Blunt's character, is a single mother of a daughter who is dealing with seizures. needs surgery for a brain issue that she has. It's a ticking timeline for her, and she decides to make the leap from exotic dancer to join a struggling pharmaceutical startup, and soon finds herself at the center of a drug ring, basically, with deadly consequences. She runs into this guy, Pete, played by Chris Evans, who is a drunk loudmouth who is desperate to push his miracle pain pills onto any doctor who will prescribe them. He hires her, brings her in. She's lured by this opportunity of a big payday, which would help to save her daughter and get her daughter the surgery that she needs. And Liza begins to believe in this, and as a passionate salesperson, she fights to find one doctor to buy into their product in a shady marketplace filled with kickbacks, backdoor dealings, and eventual blinders when things start turning really bad for the patients, as these fentanyl-laced painkillers begin having horrible results. And we find the fix to these horrible results is to up the dosage of these painkillers. So Liza proves to be very good as a sales rep, and she blows past the others in the office. And at this point, it felt to me like director David Yates really liked Wolf of Wall Street, because it had kind of a Wolf of Wall Street introduction into this movie. If this movie feels like it should be really important because of the big stars and the marquee spots. And Liza goes out, she finds the doctor, she gets everything going. They also work for Dr. Neil, who's kind of the head of this agency, played by Andy Garcia, who's kind of your big baddie. He's the billionaire who is running this and really doesn't care about the lives of people. He just wants to keep making money and keep things moving. You also have Catherine O'Hara here as Jackie, Liza's mom, who is a real mess in this movie and kind of ruins things and saves things in very incompetent ways. But at its core, it's the dynamic between Liza and Pete, Emily Blunt, Chris Evans' character, as she begins to realize that things are not going as they should. And this movie's at its best when she's out hustling these doctors, and we're given access to the underbelly of this opioid crisis. And there's moments where she feels like she's almost channeling Erin Brockovich in this, as she's going into these offices as a lady who is a high school dropout, former exotic dancer, but now she's here telling these, educated doctors what they need and kind of fooling them into doing what she wants them to do. Those are the best parts of this movie. She discovers that, things aren't what they should be, and things start to kind of blow up between her and Chris Evans. The problem is I felt like Emily Blunt is a great actress. I think she's one of my favorite actresses. She's really not allowed to cook in this movie, though. They give it to her. She's the lead of the movie. And every time she really starts to get going, it feels like the film pulls her back and we start going into Andy Garcia stuff or what have you, and it meanders, and it just really loses focus every time she gets going. Chris Evans in this, he's passionate as the character of Pete, but he's not great. And my history of Chris Evans' Netflix movies is subpar. And this, you'll see, kind of fits into that tone. Andy Garcia is the boss here. It's kind of frustrating to me because he seems to have settled into a late career malaise that is sad to see, where he's just taking these very familiar roles, Expendables 4, the Couples Retreat movie. I mean, not great. Not great stuff. Director David Yates, previously known for directing a bunch of the Harry Potter films and the Harry Potter, the Fantastic Beasts films. And there's some editing choices in this movie that made it feel really cheap. It made it feel like a cheap Netflix movie. Really frustrating in here. Catherine O'Hara is great. I love her. She's hilarious in the few scenes that she has, but she feels like she showed up for a different movie. Like she showed up for a wacky comedy. That's not what this is. We've been getting a lot of these films lately over recent years, kind of explaining events to us. We had one a few weeks ago, Dumb Money, The Big Short. I think going back to like Social Network, all these movies kind of explaining intricate, recent things to us and trying to explain it to us in a way that, here's how this has affected society. I feel like this is one of the weaker ones of the ones I mentioned, it's absolutely the weakest. Good performances, mediocre movie. I end up giving Pain Hustlers 2.5 out of 5 stars. You don't need to rush to Netflix to see this. It'll be there, waiting for you. The next streaming film I have comes to us from Hulu. It's a film called Susie Searches from director Sophie Kargman. Stars Kiersey Clemons as Susie. Susie is a part-time college student who is obsessed with true crime. She hosts her own true crime podcast that doesn't really get any interaction. She volunteers at the local sheriff's office as well when she's not working at the Bonanza Burger or caring for her ailing mother. Growing up, her happiest memories were her mom reading her detective stories that Susie would solve very early into the book. And she's at the sheriff's office one day when a call comes in about a fellow classmate, Jesse Wilcox, who has gone missing. Jesse Wilcox, played by Alex Wolff here. The sheriff, played by Jim Gaffigan. Great. Of course, she's hooked onto this mystery immediately, digging deep into Jesse's family, making this mystery her entire life, basically. What makes Jesse even more interesting to her is he has a massive online presence thanks to his meditation videos and his family being very wealthy. And Susie has dreams about saving the day and suddenly living her dream of being a successful true crime podcaster. And she's tired of being a nobody, feeling alone in a deeply connected online world. And the flip side of that is the loneliness that Jesse feels despite a massive online presence. And so Susie has a hunch about Jesse's whereabouts, but the sheriff isn't interested in it. So she goes it alone, and what she discovers is answers that lead to more questions. And you see in the trailer here that there's a lot of Jesse in here. The discovery of Jesse is in the first 15 minutes of the movie. The mysteries really start to build after that. And the mystery that she solves only serves to open up deeper mysteries and more problems. And we get an expanding mystery that engulfs the entire second half of the film. And it gets a real eerie feeling, which I really enjoyed. And the film looks great. There's a lot of really fun editing choices in here, such as when Susie starts really deep diving into the internet. Things start to swirl around her like a kaleidoscope. I really like that. But this film really revolves around the title character of Susie. And Kiersey Clemons plays her perfectly. She plays her sweetly, full of dreams, great intuition, obviously, is kind of a young sleuth. She's bubbly, she's naive. Kiersey Clemons got braces put on for this role to make her seem younger and more innocent. And I love it. And I love Kiersey Clemons. She has been in two of my favorite movies of the last 8 years, maybe. Dope, Hearts Beat Loud. Both of those were, I think, 4.5, 5-star movies for me. Absolutely love it. And she makes some decisions in here, though, that despite being the bubbly, naive person, she also makes decisions that will make you kind of feel uneasy about her character and the choices that she's making. You also have in this film Rachel Sennett, who plays Jillian. Rachel Sennett, who recently saw in Shiva Baby. She was also, she's been in a couple movies I've talked about recently. Look her up. I'm drawing a blank. She's great. She's one of my favorite new actresses. I think she's really incredible. What was the one that she was in about the high schoolers turns violent? Anyways, she's a snobby coworker at the Bonanza Burger with Susie, and man, she's so good, but she is criminally underused in this movie. Her character, I felt, could have been really fleshed out so much more, been so much more interesting because she is capable of a ton. And on the introduction to her character, I thought, okay, this is going to be fun. This is going to be an interesting pairing, this really snarky, snobby character of Jillian with this naive younger girl of Susie, and you're just left hanging with that. We also, as I mentioned, have Jim Gaffigan as Sheriff Loggins. He's the ineffective sheriff here, and he isn't given too much to do either, and I was kind of looking forward to more from him. Ken Marino plays Edgar Cabot, who is the boss of the Bonanza Burger, and for you Cosby Show fans, Elvin from The Cosby Show shows up in this. Haven't seen him in a while. He's in here, but I found myself enjoying this quite a bit. It builds a nice mood. It's got nice performances. Alex Wolff is great as Jesse, and I found myself really enjoying it. And so I ended up giving Susie Searches 3.5 out of 5 stars. It is over on Peacock. No, sorry, Hulu. It's over on Hulu. If this sounds interesting to you, go check that out. All right, let's move backwards before we move any further. As we go to a movie throwback, I spun the dial back to 1992 for a film that I don't know a lot of people that love this movie. I don't hear it talked about, but it's one that for some reason always hangs with me. And that is Mambo Kings from director Arnie Glimcher. Stars Armand Assante and a very young Antonio Banderas. It's a movie I discovered one night in 1992. It was playing on HBO, and I was drawn into it immediately. The music, young Antonio Banderas, it all hit me. I loved it. So it's a film that opens in Havana, 1950s. Cesar is confronting his brother's love, a woman named Maria, over her suspected infidelity. It leads to him being knifed and thrown out into the alley, and he's told to take Nestor away and leave Cuba for America and don't ever come back. They are musician brothers. Cesar, which is Armando Sante's character, is the singer, the band leader, very sure of himself, good with the ladies. Nestor, Antonio Banderas' character, is more reserved, a songwriter, a trumpeter. They both have the American dream of being successful, and they find themselves playing in mambo clubs in New York, having fun, but Nestor is haunted by the woman he left behind, Maria. He still pines for her, he still aches for her, and he writes a beautiful song from this pain. It's called Beautiful Maria of My Soul, which we hear played several times in this movie, and it's a haunting song, man. It's great. And the song leads to great successes for them, but more pain for Nestor's new wife, Dolores, as she realizes that she will never live up to the specter of Maria, the woman that he's never gotten over. And there's a bit of an awkward love triangle in here as well. And Armando Sante is the overbearing brother, is great. The guy who just never takes no for an answer, but he's driven. He's chasing women. You see him with Kathy Moriarty here in the trailers. And then Antonio Banderas just has sad eyes in this film. The music, the dancing, the passion, this movie has all of it. And it's a film that every time I watch it, it lifts my heart and then it crushes it. And man, it's rough, but it's a film that features the who of Latin musicians of the time. Tito Puente, various folks who are representative of that time of Latin mambo music. It's great. Desi Arnaz Jr. playing his father, Desi Arnaz Sr. In a great little I Love Lucy role here. And it's a killer soundtrack. It's one that when I watched this movie that night in 1992, watched this movie, fell in love with it. That next day, ran to the mall to Music Land to buy the CD of this soundtrack because it's so good. I absolutely love it. It's a great CD, full of great music, and opened me up to a genre of music that I, at that point, was not really well versed in, and really opened my eyes and ears to it. And it's just a film that I love. It's the first film I ever saw Antonio Banderas in, so I remember seeing this and thinking, wow, that guy's something else. He's pretty cool. Wow, he's going to be something, and sure enough, so you're welcome, Antonio. But I absolutely love Mambo Kings, and if you have not ever heard of it, seen it, watched it, check it out. It's a really good time. Now, taking a look ahead as what things are coming out. I'm looking at the weekend of November 10th. Whew, I thought I saw December down there. November 10th, we have a great weekend for movies from the outside looking in. First up, we have in theaters The Marvels. Carol Danvers gets her powers entangled with Kamala Khan and Monica Rambeau, forcing them to team up to save the universe. This is Marvel's new film. Looks like a lot of fun. The three female superheroes ganging together to help out with Samuel L. Jackson, and they're going to go out and try and save the world, and it looks like a lot of fun. You're also going to bring, I believe it's Gus the cat, bring him along for the fun. We also have in theaters The Holdovers, new Alexander Payne movie starring Paul Giamatti as a curmudgeonly history teacher at a remote boarding school who is forced to stay on campus over holiday break to deal with a troubled student who has no place to go. This trailer I've seen 1,000 times, and I love it every time. It's shot to look like an old school trailer. I feel like I should be watching this movie on VHS. Looks great. And then lastly, streaming, we have The Killer, David Fincher's new Netflix film about an assassin who must battle his bosses, as well as many others, after missing a shot, all while he begins to doubt his own mental acuity. What happens when John Wick starts to lose his mind? This stars Michael Fassbender, Tilda Swinton. Looks phenomenal. It's David Fincher. He rarely misses his shot. Before we move any further, we want to thank our sponsor, Marcus Theaters. Thank you for sponsoring this program. The Palace here in Sun Prairie. Ooh, love me a Dream Lounger. Next week, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm going to be talking about such films as Priscilla, the Priscilla Presley film, What Happens Later, the new rom-com directed and starring Meg Ryan, and Quiz Lady, our streaming film. And I'm going to be joined by my lovely and talented wife, Sarah Rabbit, to discuss all these movies. It's been a while since we had her on here, so stay tuned for that. But until next week, I'm Jamison. Enjoy your movies.